The clock struck 7:20 in the morning when Karina Mendes walked through the glass doors of VisionMark, clutching tightly the battered bag that had accompanied her for years. The main lobby reflected the metallic gleam of mirrored walls and the constant murmur of hurried employees. For many, it was just the beginning of another workday. For her, it was the beginning of another attempt to keep going. 10 years had passed since her divorce. 10 years since she watched helplessly as a life built around a love she swore would last forever, crumbled. Eduardo, the man who promised to protect her, had traded his devoted wife for a fleeting fling, leaving behind not only an empty home, but also the self-esteem of a woman who believed she had failed at everything. But time, that silent sculptor, turned pain into strength. Karina, who had previously defined herself by her roles as wife and mother, now defined herself by something new: resilience. She had started from scratch, studying at night, facing disdainful looks and closed doors, until she landed an administrative job at VisionMark, one of the largest marketing agencies in the country. Despite his modest position, there was something in his gaze that contrasted with the gray routine of the offices, a determined calm, a dignity that seemed to bother those who lived only by appearances. That morning, as she put on her badge and organized reports in the small support room, she heard her colleagues excitedly commenting on the new CEO's arrival. "They say he's a business genius," one of the assistants murmured. "Miguel Duarte. He's worked in 3 countries and never missed a campaign." Karina just smiled, focused on adjusting spreadsheets. CEOs came and went. None of them changed the fact that she was invisible. But fate sometimes disguises itself as coincidence. At 11 o'clock, an urgent meeting was called. The creative department needed to present a new proposal for a multi-million-dollar campaign, but the coordinator had fallen ill, and no one had reviewed the slides. "Karina, you're good with presentations. Can you take this to the meeting room?" asked a distressed colleague, holding out the flash drive. "Just click and scroll through the slides. It's quick." She hesitated. It wasn't her job, but as she always did, she chose to help. She climbed the 20 floors to the panoramic conference room, trying to ignore the feeling of being out of place. When he entered, silence fell. Men in suits and women in expensive dresses impatiently watched their watches. In the center of the table, he, Miguel Duarte, scrutinized documents with an impenetrable expression. Tall, with impeccable posture and attentive eyes, he exuded the authority of someone who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. "You may begin." His voice cut through the air, firm without arrogance. Karina swallowed hard. She plugged in the flash drive, projected the slides, but when the second file opened, she realized something was wrong. The sequence was incomplete. Entire pages were missing. The content simply didn't make sense. Eyes turned to her. A chill ran down her spine. "Sir, it seems there was a mistake in..." She began to explain, but the pressure of the situation pushed her to the limit between fear and courage. He took a deep breath. He looked at the graphs and images on the screen. And then, with a firm voice, he began to improvise. He spoke about the emotional connection between brands and people, about how true marketing is born from empathy, not persuasion. His words, simple and sincere, cut through the air like something no one expected to hear. Miguel looked up. For a moment, the man accustomed to measured speeches was silent. There was truth in those words. When he finished, the room remained still for a few seconds, until he said, "Interesting. Continue." Karina felt her heart race, but she continued, naturally describing ideas that came from instinct, observation, and life. She didn't speak like a trained professional, but like someone who understood people because she had lived them, because she had once been a forgotten woman trying to be seen. In the end, Miguel simply nodded. "Write down her name," he said to one of the directors. "I want her at the next planning meeting." The murmurs began immediately. Karina came down from the floor with trembling hands, unsure if it had been luck or madness. But that day something changed. The invisible had taken shape. The silent woman, once betrayed and cast aside, was beginning to be noticed, not for her pain, but for her strength. That night, upon returning to her small apartment, Karina sat on the edge of her bed and studied her reflection in the mirror. There was still weariness, subtle wrinkles, and the shadow of a past that persisted in echoing. But there was also something new, a spark. She didn't know that the man who had listened to her that day carried himself a broken past, and that the meeting between the two had not been a coincidence, but the first movement of a destiny that had been waiting for years to be fulfilled. And so, while the city slept under the cold lights of corporate buildings, Karina Mendes took the first step towards what destiny had promised her, her own rise. The following days became a whirlwind of new responsibilities. Ever since that meeting, Karina's name began to circulate through the halls of VisionMark with a mixture of curiosity and surprise. Some admired her silently. Others, like Natalia Vasconcelos, a young, ambitious, and vain marketing manager, watched her with disdain. For Natalia, a woman who came from below should never occupy a place in a position of power. But Miguel Duarte didn't seem to share this view. The following week, he called Karina for a private conversation. "Sit down." His voice, firm and controlled, contrasted with his attentive gaze. "I reviewed your presentation. I want you to work with me on VisionMark's new rebranding project." Karina blinked, astonished. "With you?" He smiled briefly. "With me. It's not a favor. It's a merit. You have something that many people here lack: authenticity." Those words echoed within her. For years, she had been relegated to a secondary role, and now, someone finally saw value in her essence. In the days that followed, meetings with Miguel became routine. His top-floor office commanded a panoramic view of the city, a concrete jungle that seemed to curve beneath the setting sun. There, amid folders, charts, and cups of coffee, a silent and powerful partnership was born. Miguel discovered in her a sensitivity that disarmed even the coldest marketing challenges. Karina, in turn, perceived in Miguel a man of restrained strength, who hid a discreet sadness beneath absolute control. One late night, while they were reviewing a campaign, he broke the silence. "You know, Mendes, sometimes life teaches us more through pain than through victory." She looked at him tenderly. "I think pain makes us more truthful," she replied. And Miguel simply nodded with the look, a look that said more than any words. That connection, born of respect and empathy, began to blossom into something more. Colleagues noticed their rapport. Conversations became more personal. Exchanges of glances lingered. Natalia, uncomfortable, began spreading rumors in the hallways. She said Karina was getting too close to the CEO. But Karina was undeterred. She worked with the same dedication she always had. Until one day, the past decided to knock on the door. A major international client was about to sign a contract with VisionMark. The intermediary in the negotiations was none other than Eduardo Paiva, Karina's ex-husband. When she saw his name on the guest list for the partnership meeting, her blood ran cold. "This can't be," she thought. 10 years without contact, and now fate had brought her face to face with the man who destroyed her. On the day of the meeting, the air felt heavier. Karina tried to maintain a professional demeanor. She dressed with understated elegance. Beige blazer, hair tied back, light makeup. When Eduardo walked in, his confident smile faded for a moment as he recognized her. "Karina," he murmured, surprised. "You work here?" "I work." Her voice was firm, but her heart was pounding. "Welcome to VisionMark." Miguel sensed the discomfort, but didn't comment. During the meeting, he silently observed the tension that lingered between them. When Eduardo tried to take control of the conversation, it was Karina who intervened, offering technical and creative arguments that impressed even the foreign executives. Miguel saw something different there. Not just a competent professional, but a woman facing her own demons without shying away. After the meeting, Eduardo looked for her in the hallway. "You've changed, Karina," he said with a hidden smile. "I never imagined seeing you in this place," she replied without looking at him. "Yes, I don't think you ever imagined many things about me." He tried to laugh, but his eyes betrayed his discomfort. His betrayed ex-wife was standing tall, confident, and he didn't know how to deal with it. In the following days, Eduardo began insisting on dinners, to settle matters, sending veiled messages, as if trying to regain the emotional control he once had over her. Karina ignored them all, but what she didn't know was that he was also trying to get closer to Miguel, offering advantageous partnerships, and little by little, inquiring about the CEO's new protégé. Meanwhile, inside VisionMark, projects moved forward. Karina presented bold ideas, proposed humanized campaigns, transforming cold data into soulful stories. And every time Miguel watched her speak in public, he saw in her a reflection of something he himself had lost: hope. One night at the end of a long performance, they were alone in the living room. The city outside glistened in the rain. Miguel broke the silence. "You're different, Karina. You don't play for show. You work because you believe. That's rare." She smiled shyly. "I've learned that recognition isn't the starting point. It's a consequence." A soft silence fell, and for a moment, his gaze dropped to her lips. Quick, restrained. But he quickly looked away, maintaining his composure. "Good evening, Mendes," he said with a slight smile. The door closed, but something inside them both remained open. The next morning, the rumors intensified. Natalia spread stories insinuating that Karina had only been promoted for personal reasons. Miguel sensed the mood and, without hesitation, called the entire team together. VisionMark values results, not rumors. Starting today, Karina Mendes will be responsible for the international Horizonte Azul project. The silence in the room was absolute. Natalia almost choked on her own fury. But for Karina, that moment wasn't just a promotion. It was a symbol, a silent turning point against everything that had once made her believe she was small. However, fate, once again, prepared its next blow. That same afternoon, Eduardo sent Miguel an email, sounding friendly, revealing details of Karina's past, the divorce, the betrayal, the financial difficulties. He wanted to sow doubt, destabilize her image. But Miguel didn't answer. He just stared out the window thinking. He had known, from the beginning. And yet, he had chosen to trust. Outside, the sky was clearing after the storm. Karina walked through the company's corridors, unaware that the past was trying to pull her back, and that the true test of her strength was about to begin. VisionMark building, revealing the woman climbing with her, step by step, rebuilding not just her career, but her very soul. The day of the big presentation arrived with an almost palpable weight in the air. It was the most important event of the year for VisionMark, the launch of the new international campaign, which could cement the company as a global benchmark in human and sustainable marketing. In the main auditorium, journalists, investors, and directors from various branches filled every seat. Cameras broadcast the event live. For Karina, it was the most defining moment of her career. She had spent weeks preparing every detail, every word, every image. Miguel watched everything from afar, discreet but attentive. He knew how much that woman had fought to get there. He also knew that the winds of the past were blowing again, and that the enemy would use cruelty as a weapon. Eduardo Paiva, Karina's ex-husband, was present. He arrived with a confident smile, the same one he wore when he lied remorselessly. He represented the partner company that was financing part of the campaign, but behind the cordial gestures lay a carefully crafted plan to hit her where it hurt most, her dignity. Karina, elegantly dressed in a navy blue ensemble, walked onto the stage with the serenity of someone who had learned to master her fear. The light reflected in her brown eyes, now firm, aware of everything she had overcome to be there. "Good afternoon, everyone." His voice echoed clear and firm. Today, VisionMark presents more than a campaign. It presents an idea born from the courage to start over. The first few minutes were impeccable. The audience listened in silence, impressed by the depth of the proposal, a concept that connected real stories of human overcoming to the building of authentic brands. But then Eduardo stood up. He interrupted the speech with a forced smile and a folder in his hands. Forgive me, Miguel, but before we continue, I think everyone here should know who is really responsible for this project. The murmur spread through the auditorium. Karina stopped. Miguel stood up slowly, his gaze cold. Eduardo opened the folder and displayed documents. This is Karina Mendes. 10 years ago, she destroyed her marriage, abandoned her home, and reportedly lived off favors. His tone was venomous, calculated. Can someone like that really represent a campaign about ethics and truth? The silence that followed was piercing. Camera flashes began to go off. Karina felt the ground slip away for a moment. The past, the one she had buried with so much effort, now came flooding back like a public sentence. But before she could react, Miguel stepped forward. Enough. His voice was firm, implacable. You are not authorized to disclose the personal information of a member of my team. Eduardo laughed defiantly. Are you defending your protege, is that it? Or is there something more between you, Mr. Duarte? The words were like blades thrown in the wind. Eyes turned to Miguel, waiting for a reaction. He stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Eduardo. Yes, there's something more. There's respect, there's admiration, and there's truth. A murmur ran through the audience. Karina looked at him in surprise, but he continued. I know her story. I know what she faced, what she lost, and what she rebuilt. I know she was betrayed by a cowardly man who made her believe she was worthless. She paused, her gaze fixed on her enemy. And I know it was precisely this pain that made her the brilliant professional she is here today, before everyone, transforming scars into strength. The silence that followed was absolute. Eduardo, pale, tried to react. That's absurd. You're lying. Miguel turned to the audience. All the data and results for this campaign have been approved by me, and if there's anyone who represents VisionMark's values, it's her. Then he looked at Karina, and in that look was a statement that needed no words. Because sometimes, the people who have been broken the most are the only ones capable of understanding the true meaning of rebuilding. The auditorium erupted in applause. The cameras captured the scene that would go viral from then on. The CEO publicly defending a woman the world had tried to silence. Eduardo was removed from the scene by security guards, furious, while Karina remained motionless, tears in her eyes, unable to process everything. After the event, she took refuge on the building's terrace, in silence. The cool night wind brushed against her hot face. Miguel appeared soon after, carrying 2 cups of coffee. You didn't have to do that, she said, her voice trembling. You could have let me figure it out on my own. He approached slowly. I didn't defend you, Karina. I just told the truth. She smiled, her eyes welling up. I don't know what to say. Miguel stared at the horizon for a few seconds before answering. Just say you'll keep going. Because what happened today didn't break you. It freed you. The silence that followed was light, almost serene. The city lights reflected in her eyes, and in that instant Karina realized she was no longer the woman she'd left behind. She was a new version of herself, whole, strong, reborn. Miguel stepped forward. The wind ruffled Karina's loose hair, and his gaze, for the first time, wasn't that of a CEO, but of a man who saw before him the woman destiny had chosen at the right time. Life is curious, isn't it? He said with a half smile. Sometimes it puts us at the bottom only to see who we really are when we climb back up. Karina nodded, overcome with emotion. I thought I'd lost everything, but I think I was actually being prepared. Miguel extended his hand, a calm, respectful gesture. She accepted, and there, under the sky of the city that once symbolized failure, a silent promise was born, not of fairy tales, but of a love that blossoms in maturity, in truth, and in mutual respect. The imaginary camera would slowly pull away, showing the 2 of them on the illuminated terrace, small before the immensity of the city, but giants before history itself. The betrayed ex-wife was now the woman rewriting her own destiny, and the CEO was the man who knew how to see beyond appearances. The confrontation was over, but the transformation was just beginning. The days following the historic presentation were marked by a calm that hadn't existed in Karina's life for years. Her name began to circulate in magazines, newspapers, and corporate social media as a symbol of competence, courage, and resilience. VisionMark grew with the Blue Horizon campaign launched during the climax, winning international clients and strengthening the agency's reputation as a benchmark in human-centered marketing. Karina was no longer the woman who walked the hallways almost invisible, observing the judgmental glances. She had become someone who inspired colleagues, clients, and above all herself. Miguel, ever present, closely observed her every move, not only as CEO but also as a silent partner, admiring the determination that shone through Karina's every gesture and decision. Her ex-husband, Eduardo Paiva, had disappeared from the corporate radar. His attempt to destabilize the protagonist had failed, and he now faced severe criticism for his unethical behavior. All that remained for him was belated regret, but there was no turning back. The past no longer held power over Karina. On a clear spring morning, Miguel called Karina into his office for a private meeting. "Congratulations," he said, smiling genuinely. "The campaign was a success and you handled it impeccably." Karina smiled, feeling a sense of profound recognition, something she hadn't experienced since the darkest days after her divorce. "Thank you, Miguel. But I couldn't have done it without your belief in me." He walked to the window, watching the city awaken with the sun reflecting off the tall buildings. "Karina, I believed in you because I saw the woman who was always hidden behind circumstances. You're not just competent, you're whole, true." She felt heat rise to her face, not from vanity but from something more intense, the feeling of finally being understood, seen, and respected. "Then it was all worth it," she said, lowering her gaze, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. Every tear, every night of fear, every misstep. Miguel turned to her, moving closer. The silence in the office was comfortable, charged with unspoken but intensely felt emotions. "It was all worth it," he repeated with a conviction that left no room for doubt. From that day on, the dynamic between them changed. It wasn't just a CEO-creative director relationship. It was a partnership built on trust, admiration, and mutual respect. Their once discreet glances now met with restrained intensity. Their gestures became increasingly natural, closer, yet unhurried, as if each moment were too precious to be rushed. Karina still remembered the nights she cried alone, feeling defeated and invisible. Now she looked back and saw that every hardship had been a silent step toward her growth. The trauma of divorce, which once seemed insurmountable, had become a silent force that guided her in every decision. She walked the halls of VisionMark with an erect posture, greeting colleagues, smiling confidently. There was no arrogance, just the serenity of someone who knows her own worth. Natalia, previously an antagonist, watched with a mixture of envy and restrained respect. Karina no longer needed to prove anything. The results spoke for themselves. A few weeks later, a low-key celebration marked the campaign's success. Miguel and Karina stood side by side, watching their colleagues celebrate. "You deserve all of this," Miguel said, offering Karina his hand. She accepted, feeling like she could finally relax. "And you too," she replied with a serene smile, "because believing in me was the first step toward making all this happen." Life, for both of them, had taken on new meaning. Karina was no longer the woman who had suffered alone. She was the woman who triumphed, who inspired, and who, above all, loved and was truly loved. Miguel, who had lost hope in trust and love, found in her a partnership that filled the voids he hadn't known existed. The past no longer held power over her. Eduardo, with all his attempts at manipulation, became nothing more than a distant shadow, irrelevant to the light Karina radiated. And even when faced with new corporate challenges, unexpected crises, or complex contracts, she knew she could face any obstacle, not by luck, but because she carried within her the strength of overcoming, resilience, and the love that quietly blossomed alongside Miguel. In the end, Karina realized that her story wasn't about loss, nor about pain. It was about rebirth, about the ability to transform scars into confidence, frustrations into motivation, tears into determination. She had rewritten her own destiny, climbing step by step, facing adversity and conquering a space that no one could ever take from her. VisionMark buildings, Karina and Miguel walked side by side on the office terrace, gazing at the horizon. The cool wind blew lightly, ruffling her hair, and his smile reflected the certainty that this was just the beginning of a new life. Together, stronger, more whole, happier. And there, under the starry sky, the woman who had once been betrayed became the woman who won. The CEO, the partner, the lover of a man who knew how to see beyond appearances. The woman who showed the world that true strength is born from pain, love, and the courage to not give up.